Morning, guys. Well, I'm obsessed with cathedrals, completely into cathedrals at the moment. Everything about them I just find completely fascinating, and I want to know what they were. I want to know what they were and what they did pre their religious status. Just look at this. Completely and totally amazing. The work that goes into them, the arches, the vaulting, the disrupted state of these arches. This all has a meaning. This isn't just for decoration. All of this here. And the thickness of the walls. The incredible thickness of the stone. Just look at this. I mean, the huge mysteries are surrounding these buildings as well. The makers of them. There's a lot of controversy within the architectural and archaeology circles, the academic circles, as to who actually built them, although I'm pretty sure that they know. But also I was also interested in fractal cathedrals. There's a lot of the DMT imagery that you see from artists uses they always go to cathedrals. They often have cathedrals, and there's also seems to be a sort of a trend to illuminate cathedrals, the outsides of cathedrals with little lights, and the insides of cathedrals. Anyway, I thought I'd start here because I've been noticing, along with others, Charlie Jeans and others, that a lot of churches and cathedrals have these little boxes outside with wires that go up the sides of the buildings and onto the roofs. And I've researched the things, and they're modern lightning rods. You see? This is on Southwark Cathedral. So I had to find out just how a lightning rod worked. So the lightning rod has been sort of like given to Benjamin Franklin. He invented it. So what he realised was that you can actually draw lightning from the clouds. I'll leave all these links because there's so much information to take in, and I haven't got a very scientific mind and no maths, but I understood it enough. So Benjamin Franklin performed experiments and realised that he could actually draw lightning from clouds. You draw it in and you can divert it. And he also found out that you could make a Leyden jar, a capacitor, by combining the concept of equal positive and negative states. So he got a jar, and you put on conductive material inside and outside, and the charge can be stored inside, so it can release a charge. And he also constructed an electrical battery using panes of window glass sandwiched between thin lead plates. So this is all about how he made these lightning rods. And it's through the church, because they started to put them on top of churches in the mid 19th century to stop them getting hit by lightning. And the church went into a bit of a meltdown about it. They didn't want it. Now, well, I've done a lot of research on this, but unfortunately I had two windows open. I was using Chrome, and I was using this other one. And when I went to Chrome last night to look at my bookmarks, they completely reset Chrome. I can only get on as a guest at the moment, and I can't access my bookmarks. But I managed to find most of the stuff that I was looking at, and I'm going to see if I can remember other stuff as I go along, you know, just fill in. So he found out, right, he did a lot of experiments, and he found out that there's two types of electricity, and that the clouds of a thunder gust are most commonly in a negative state of electricity, but sometimes in a positive state. So you could never really sort of judge what was going on. For the most part, in thunderstrokes, it is the earth that strikes into the clouds, and not the clouds that strike into the earth. So he is the guy attributed to doing the lightning rod. And here's one, I think, going up the side of a building. Actually, I think this is the picture of his original lightning rod in Philadelphia. So they're taken, so when you use one of these lightning rods, the electrical charge is safely distributed into the ground and earth, thereby deflecting it. So I thought to myself, well, you know, what did they do before? And then I read that what does actually appear to happen is that you can draw the electricity from the clouds. It doesn't have to strike the lightning bolt. It doesn't have to strike it. And then I found out that another word for lightning rod is finial, and these are finials. So then I started to think to myself, what if pre-lightning rod the finials drew the electrical energy from the atmosphere and stored it? See the gargoyles there? They stored it and utilised it. So how would they do that, and what would they store it in? Well, the cathedral itself is made of living stone. Yeah? So, the Leyden jar. So a Leyden jar is a condenser or a capacitor, and the reasons for those two names become obvious when one understands the logic of its operation. So the earliest Leyden jars of the mid-18th century. So nothing happened before the mid-18th century. Prior to the mid-18th century, nobody knew anything about lightning. Nobody knew anything about how electricity functioned, atmospheric electricity, and they were having to sort of reinvent everything. Of course it was all known about before. They were just working out. They were working it out. They were rediscovering stuff. This has all been done before. And they just used different materials with the same conclusions. So this is where I have problems because of my left brain deficiency. So the earliest Leyden jars were a glass bottle fitted with a cork and filled with water. A copper wire, which was immersed in the water, ran through the cork and was held to a machine generating, let us say, a negative charge. Today we know that this means the generator is sending electrons flowing through the wire and the water, creating a negative charge on the inside of the glass. If the bottle were insulated from the earth, one would soon reach a point at which no more negative charge or electrons could be absorbed by the jar. But with an experimenter holding the outside of the bottle, the results were quite different. Since like charges repel, the force of the negative charges on the inside of the bottle would push electrons out from the experimenter's palm and the adjacent glass and ultimately into the earth. The positive charge remaining on the experimenter's hand and adjacent glass would pull on the electrons inside the glass. It's amazing. So I was watching UAP this morning and he was playing a bit of Global Vision's video and I couldn't find it. I was trying to find it because they were looking at a lot of pottery jars that are found in cathedrals and all of the metal work that was in there. So it looked to me almost like a Faraday cage, you know. But let's keep going. So I found this, the fractal pattern of the French Gothic cathedrals. So going back to our fantasy cathedrals, this is beautiful. This is some sort of Muslim work. Look at it, how beautiful it is. Fractal, but it's fractal, isn't it? Right, where was I? So this guy here, he's looked at the French Gothic cathedral and Mandelbrot fractals, and he's sort of like does a nod to Euclidean geometry, which was used in the construction, but he's also identified that there's another complex concept, the unevenness of their structures, because they're very, very space filling. They fill a lot of space, so they use fractal geometry to generate parameters just to see if they have a general non-random fractal pattern. And they do a lot of work on this. They talk about Mandelbrot, historical setting, Gothic art, Notre Dame Cathedral, and how with the Notre Dame Cathedral the central nave was raised and the light became the dominant element. Chartres Cathedral, and so they looked at 20 French cathedrals. So the master craftsmen had to be extensively knowledgeable about mathematics, particularly geometry. They didn't have a precise scale. And here we go. Amiens. They really go into this. I'll leave the link so you can have a look, but let's get to the conclusion. Look at the windows, look at everything. Look. Aren't they fantastic? Just look at them, and then don't think church. Right, conclusion after all this. The classic patterns of the Euclidean geometry were used in the construction of the Gothic cathedrals to provide them with proportion and beauty. Still, as well as Euclidean elements, there is another complex concept in them, the unevenness of their structures, which determines their space-filling ability. The best tool to describe this concept is given by fractal geometry by means of a ratio called fractal dimension. In this paper we use this concept to generate fractal parameters. So they're space-filling fractal designs. They fill space. So why? There's so many people at the moment that are just sort of looking at this and working this through. So here we go. Tesla coil. So a Tesla coil is a category of disruptive discharge coils named after Nikola Tesla. Tesla actually experimented with a large variety of coils and configurations, so it is difficult to describe a specific mode of construction. So lots and lots of ways of making a Tesla coil. So here we go. Now the reason I want you to look at this, I want you to research Tesla coils for yourself, because it takes a bit of time to get your head around. So I mean, we talk about these things, we say, oh yeah, it's a Tesla coil, oh yes, it's blah blah blah, but actually understanding what they are and what they do is a different thing. It's all about winding coils, different metals, conducting surfaces, and they give a little description. This is like a Tesla coil schematic, right? And I had to show you this because it looks like a basic church diagram, doesn't it? Hey? Yeah. And then we have Faraday cages. Faraday cages are enclosed spaces which are covered in conducting material or a mesh of material, and a Faraday cage's operation depends on the fact that an external static electrical field causes the electrical charges within the cage's conducting material to be distributed so they cancel the field's effect in the cage's interior. This phenomenon is used, for example, to protect electronic equipment from lightning strikes and electrostatic discharges. So, why are our cathedrals covering themselves with devices that are designed to actually pull electricity from the energy from the atmosphere? What would be the point? Well, the other thing I looked at, well, I'll probably have to come to that, is church organs. But I don't know if I saved that. Oh yeah, here we go. So church organs. I'm not going to read all of this because I want to get on and show you the interesting part of all this. Now, early organs only had the white notes on the piano, like do 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 do. They only had that. They had no black notes, and some of them only had one note. Yeah, they had no bass either. So when you look at some of the organs in the older churches, they're very simple. Really, really simple. And then later on they become very, very complex. As the time goes on, they become more complex and they have more keyboards and more horns and everything. And also I was looking at how they were built, and how they were built is just absolutely, completely incredible. They have to make each pipe separately, and they line them with metal. They have to bang out the metal. This is in the more modern churches, the Western churches. Right, okay. So an organ that only plays one note or only has a key of a range of a few notes was probably used more for tone and vibration. So we've got vibration, and we've got electricity, and we've got light. Let's look at this. This is good. This is a brilliant site. It's called the Leyden Saga. So lightning. So in here he talks about the way of the lightning, where people actually become awakened by getting bashed by lightning. Fire from heaven, alchemy and lightning. Using a kite that the followers of Zeus channeled lightning. Well, Benjamin Franklin reckoned he was the one who discovered it, but the Chinese had noticed how dangerous it could be, alchemists. Now this is the little bit that we're listening to. In Concarnew, where I lived for 12 years, the Kyriolock Castle, that belonged to a 19th century alchemical brotherhood, has a tower provided in its glory of a starry solid which was used as a magnet for Olympians' operations. The solid has fallen some day and is currently ranked in the cellars of the castle. We still see it on old postcards. The solid the author mentioned is what I call a lightning sensor. It differs from the lightning rod for this important feature. The sensor captures and uses lightning, its light, its power, its energy, while the lightning rod simply gets everything back down to earth, wasting the energy. A free, clean, renewable energy. Olympian operation. Right, I've re-edited the video because there was some stuff that I left out. I had to take some stuff out and put some stuff in. So this is what I missed out, and this is really important. This guy on the Leyden Saga Xavier Seguin. He's got some amazing stuff on here, seriously. So he's talking about how the big problem in our world is how we're cut off from nature and that we see it as inanimate, and how people walked barefoot, and how the Aborigines in Australia walk barefoot and feed the subtle energies. And these energies energize us. So yet the current era almost totally ignores it. But this has not always been the case. So he's saying that when the building of the churches and cathedrals started, it was because they'd worked out that the cosmotelluric activity, which is from things like ley lines, from the ley lines. Now, I'm not very good on ley lines. For things like ley lines, I'm going to have to do another video on ley lines. It's another one of those things that people talk about and I don't really know that much about. I know they're energetic lines. I think there's two sorts. I know there's a really big one that traverses the UK. I think it's called St Michael's. I know Miss Havisham is very good on the ley lines, but I'm not particularly knowledgeable. But it says nowadays geobiologists have rediscovered them. They call them Hartmann grids. Now these places apparently have this negative energy in, or H grids. To get rid of them and to create conditions conducive to spiritual growth, the cathedral's builders made sorts of Faraday cages where living stones capture any harmful radiation. In Romanesque churches, H networks are driven back into the thick walls, and so the nave is purged of them, but it often creates an area of high negative energy just outside the walls. To use this energy, Romanesque companions set the cemetery around the church, and this is where the bones thing that Miss Havisham talks about must come in, and thus the negativity surrounding the church kept the ghosts outside. In Gothic cathedrals, on the other hand, the networks are sucked into the vault and dismembered by bursters, the rose stones, the capitals, or gargoyle sculptures. So nothing is purely decorative in the sacred construction. The naves of the sky brought the believers into the white light. The naves of heaven outweighed the faithful in the white light, built by inspired human beings, these machines for making gods. Every time he has something done in red, you get a really cool link. So machines for making gods takes us to the temples of light. There's a good link to where he talks about the Middle Ages. And you go to the page and then it says they did not exist. So he's on the ball. I think he's a globy, but you know, doesn't matter, does it? So yeah, interesting stuff. Right, I found this a few years ago and it meant nothing to me then. This guy called Andrew Cross, he did an experiment using electromagnetic fields, and produced insects from nowhere. They just appeared. They just completely appeared from nowhere. Here's his, and here's the insect. It's been given a name. It's a species, and he showed Michael Faraday, who was very big at the time because of his magnetic electric experiments, and he was the guy who made himself the name. And he was so impressed that he took it to the Royal Society and they talked about it, and there was a paper published, and then it disappeared. Soon afterwards, all notice of the phenomenon ceased to be reported, and the matter has not been resolved since. So Andrew Cross in 1837 performs an experiment that produces insects, out of thin air when certain forces are in place. And then I found this. This is a couple of guys in the 1990s who were doing some experiments in Switzerland, and they exposed cereal seeds and fish eggs to an electrostatic field, that is, to a high voltage field in which no current flows. So basically it's like a Faraday cage. Yeah. Unexpectedly, primeval organisms grew out of these seeds and eggs. A fern that no botanist was able to identify, primeval corn with up to 12 ears per stalk, wheat that was ready to be harvested in just 4 to 6 weeks, and giant trout extinct in Europe for 130 years with so-called salmon hooks. It was as if these organisms accessed their own genetic memories on command in the electric field. The Swiss pharmaceutical group patented the process and then stopped the research in 1992. Why? The discovery was forgotten, without the scientific community taking any notice. Really? Really? Do you ever go into a supermarket and wonder how in the world they managed to do all this food? Just think about the supermarkets and the shops in your town, and then think about the area and the cities and the country and then other countries, and then where the hell does all this food come from? Let me show you some of the results of the tests. So I believe this is absolutely fascinating, completely fascinating. So this is the fern they grew, and these are the primeval ferns that they believe that it came from. The maize is just astonishing. They grow maize, and they carry on growing for different generations. Their change carries on into different generations. So there's actually maize being grown in Bavaria. That is as a result of this thing here. I think the picture might be here. So they used higher life forms, and they used trout. And they had these amazing trout that were a third larger, heavier, fleshier and stronger. Stronger teeth, more teeth, extremely strong colours. So these incredibly large, healthy creatures were coming out of these experiments and seemed to be accessing their genetics. I don't know if there's any photographs here. No. So electricity again, electromagnetic energy, electrostatic energy again affects the genetic code, improves the growth rate, improves the health, they grow longer. I mean, they were picking this maize something like 6 weeks after they planted it. And I found a patent as well. Here's the patent. Very, very simple. And then they explain exactly what happens. This has been shown before. This apparently above top secret looked at this about 5-6 years ago. And the other one, the little insects appearing, Rex on the Leap project looked at it last year or the year before. And there's also somebody on the Miles Johnson channel who talks about insects materialising. And weirdly, my son and I tried to catch a spider the other week and it just disappeared. But I think that might have run away. It's a shame there's no photographs on this one. I had them all bookmarked. If I can find them again, I'll... So yeah, they were so confident in it that they patented it. But it got buried. The information's obviously been buried. It's the same way as the flies. And they've just can't carry on with their research. There is absolutely no way this research was buried. To be able to sort of like grow food faster by just increasing the magnetic field around it in some way. It's just too good an economic opportunity to let go, isn't it? So where has this sort of got me with my cathedrals? Well, I think that they were machines that attracted electricity from the atmosphere, stored it within their walls. They probably had a way of storing it in capacitors. I think maybe they even attracted storms, and that they could vibrate to a level where they might even become interdimensional, especially these big ones. They were healing places. Things could probably grow in here. Maybe they created things like ozone as well, because when to ionize the air, it's just sparking the air and ionizing it. So they were multifunctional. Who knows? People might have gone in there small and walked out there large. I think it was a way of accessing the other dimension, maybe getting information from there. And I think they were most likely portals as well. And I'm going to be extending my research. And this is basically a bit of an information drop, so that if anybody has got any sort of like ideas that I can sort of add to this, I would be more than grateful, because I have got no scientific knowledge, none at all. When I went to school, it was like the boys did electronics and the girls did cookery, you know. And yeah, all through my life I've been a single parent a lot of my life. I've always been the one who's rewired the speakers and replaced fuses and joined up electrical wires that got cut in half, and often thought to myself, I'd like to have known a little bit more about electronics and magnetics. It's just another compartmentalizing people, not getting us to think about things. But these things, these were not built for a religious purpose. Well, they were built for a religious purpose, but not religious in the way we think about. It's more of a spiritual ascension purpose, and a health purpose. These were holistic, interdimensional, health-giving machines, and they're absolutely awesome. I think they vibrated as well. They must have looked amazing. I bet they had Tesla sparking and everything going on. I bet they hummed and they glowed, and they were just absolutely awesome. I mean, I've seen churches and cathedrals around here with burn marks up the sides. Oh, and another thing I thought of, I think maybe the smaller churches were basic healing machines. They were just basic. These things took you to the next level. These things could actually stand in 2 dimensions. I think these had the ability to stand in 2 dimensions when they were vibrating and they were fully charged, and maybe there were special days in the year when they did that. So guys, thanks for watching. It's a little bit of a info dump really, and I've zipped through it, but it's been sitting on my computer for days. Half the bookmarks have disappeared, and I just need to get rid of it so I can move on to the next part. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and back soon, yeah?